was nervous I wasn't going to have a mic. Good to see you all this evening. I think most of you know that Amber and I have two daughters, Lillian and Scarlett, and it is such a pleasure and a joy to watch these girls grow and to see their different personalities and the things that they take to. Lillian, for example, if given her choice, would choose to do artistic things. She loves to draw and paint and color, and she's quite talented at that. We enjoy that. Scarlett, if given her choice, tends to gravitate to the outdoors. And we've got an interesting story. This past summer, she was outside one day and she discovered a frog. And this little frog to her was just such an exciting thing to try to catch it. And the frog would squirm and she would chase it. And had a lot of fun with that. So she asked me to catch it for her, so I did. And I handed her the frog, and she loved that. And she played with it for a bit, and then she asked her mother for a mason jar. And so her mother got her a mason jar, and she thought, oh, she'll put the frog inside, and she'll be able to watch it some more and let the frog be peaceful, and that will be sweet. And when we came back a little bit later, we were surprised to see that, no, actually, Scarlett had taken the jar and was rolling the jar on top of the frog. So the frog was not enjoying it at all, but Scarlett was having fun with it. She thought that the frog was playing along too, but the frog obviously was getting the raw end of the deal there. So the day went on like this, and we saw that the frog had no future. And the final story was told on the frog is summed up in the picture that Kyla captured and put in the bulletin one week this summer, where Scarlett is standing outside with a frilly dress-up costume dress on, holding a stick, on the end of which she has skewered this frog. And she is presenting it for her mother to take the picture. And so this is how she found enjoyment. And I couldn't help but think to myself, boy, if there's any person or anything that I had preferred not to trade places with at this time, it's that frog. I tend to enjoy my role in life, and that frog has found a less fortunate path. And as we step back for a minute, there's actually quite a poignant and powerful lesson to be garnered from that, because I find safety in my role, and I have some authority in our home and a role of safety and security. And this frog had a position of subjectivity to Scarlett's will in this instance. And I would never choose to trade places with this frog, to reduce myself to the role of this frog and subject myself to its destiny. But turning our minds here, that was a humorous story, but turning our minds here more seriously, can we imagine someone willingly subjecting themselves to torment and to torture and to such a treatment by men, willingly doing that? And as we read in Philippians, the 2nd chapter, we read of Christ's attitude and how Christ, though he found himself co-eternal with God the Father and in a position of authority in heaven at the right hand of God the Father, Christ, in perfect submission to God's will, humbled himself, and he emptied himself, and he became a lower being. He became a man to walk among men on this earth, and that he fully well knew that he would soon fall into the hands of men. And so I'd like to read from Philippians 2nd chapter, beginning in verse 5. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross.
Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. There in verse 6 where it says, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. That is a contrast between the nature and the actions of Christ contrasted with the first man, with Adam and his actions in the garden. As Adam reached out and partook of that apple of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in an attempt to be like God, instead, Christ, who was in very nature God, did not consider that a thing to be grasped or to be held onto, and instead willingly chose to empty himself and to become a man and walk among men. So as we consider our walk with Christ, one of the very central characteristics of Christ and aspects of a Christian's life is to imitate Christ's humility and to rid ourselves of any pridefulness because of our position, and to rid ourselves of any pridefulness or of any the word escapes me at the moment, but to instead adopt a spirit of humility to imitate Christ and to become a servant to those around about us. So as we think about our Christian walk, let's remember what Christ has done for us, and remember in our Christian walk the attitude of humility and obedience that we want to portray and want to imitate as we live our lives for God. So as you think on these things this evening, if there is any among us who are subject to the invitation of Christ this evening, who have never put on Christ through baptism, or if there are any here that have any need or concern and need the prayers of the church, you can come now as we stand and as we sing.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood
All righty, we're ready to get started. Turn in your Bibles, 1 Kings chapter 14 and verse 21. 1 Kings chapter 14 and verse 21. Now, we're going to kind of do it backwards, or I guess just mixed up. We're going to start in 1 Kings 14:21, talk about that for a little bit. Then we're going to go back to 1 Kings 12, and then we're going to go back to the end of 1 Kings 14 and finish that. It's not in order, but I get to teach the Bible class, so that's the order we're going in. So, just joking about that. All right, we are studying Kings tonight, and that's what we're doing this quarter. We've studied Saul, David, Solomon. Those are your three of the United Kingdom. Jeroboam also is the king over a United Kingdom, but it doesn't last very long. Or Rehoboam, Rehoboam is. Now, how do you always remember who gets to be the king of the northern kingdom, who gets to be the king of the southern kingdom? Well, the way I always remember it is I think of the American Civil War. Remember, the South are always called the rebels, right? Does anybody else need a outline sheet? I think you got it covered pretty well. Oh, Van needs one. I think of the South being the rebels, okay? So when you're thinking of the kings, the southern king is Rehoboam. See that Reb at the beginning? Rehoboam. And the northern king is Jeroboam. And so Rehoboam, the rebel, is at the bottom. Now, don't think about that too long, because then you'll get thinking, well, wait a second, it's the northern kingdom that rebelled and ran away. So, but that's just confusing stuff. So don't think that far. Just be shallow like me, and life is great. It feels good in the shallow pool here. All right, so as we're going across looking at that, we see Rehoboam coming in, and actually Jeroboam, even though he's mentioned before, we'll study him not next week, but the week after. So let's go ahead and run through and check out this Rehoboam guy. In chapter 14, verse 21, we see in this part, where he reigns, Rehoboam, son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old.
There's a white BMW sitting in the parking lot running.
Hey, Ronnie, your car is still running.
Okay, all right, always with you.
All right. Yes. Every once in a while we get concerned. It's been running for about an hour. But he's like most people in church. He thought he was getting out of here a lot earlier, and he really is. All right. Ronnie is here working on our sound system, making sure everything works, making sure life is good on our live stream and everything else. Because for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have stood in the pulpit going, and everybody thinks I'm talking, but I'm not if you look at live stream. And but anyway, all right, back to where we are. All right, we got Rehoboam here, son of Solomon, reigned 41 years. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes. Of course, Judah did evil in these days as you go through, more than all their fathers had done. Verse 23, they built for themselves high places, sacred pillars, and wooden images on every hill and under every green tree. There are also perverted persons in the land. That would be language for homosexuality. They did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. All right, so here we go with Rehoboam. Now, what I want us to do is we focus on this part of Rehoboam's life. How old was he when he became king? 41, okay? How long did Saul reign? How long did David reign? And how long did Solomon reign? They all reigned 40, okay. So when Solomon became king, Rehoboam was 1 year old. So all he saw through his whole life, from being a little boy to being an adolescent to being a teenager to being an adult, was Solomon and Solomon's career. So think if you're growing up in Solomon's house, all right? What do you think would be some of his memories? What do you think would be some of the things that really stood out to him as he watched his daddy being king? Okay, the different things his dad tried as you look in Ecclesiastes, building this huge temple, an even larger palace. Okay, all the women, huh?
Yeah, even the stuff that wasn't okay.
Right, good stuff and bad stuff, right? Good stuff and bad stuff. All the women, all the weird religions that were kind of showing up because Solomon was trying to keep all these women happy, right, from foreign lands. just the money and the wealth, the power, the importance, all these things wrapped together, okay? Imagine seeing all that growing up. That is the impression that comes across to Rehoboam. And what's interesting is you and I start here, what we're going to see is Rehoboam is his father. You ever see like a little boy that looks just like his daddy or just like his granddaddy? And not only does he have the same ears and nose, some guys have those ears, and every kid in the family has those ears, right? Okay, or the same nose or the same lips or the same cowlick in the hair. Not only are some kids that way, but do you ever see it like when you see a toddler talking and he is talking the exact same way that his daddy talks and using the exact same phrases sometimes? Or you ever notice how a girl, as she's growing up, she will look just like her mother or her grandmother, and she has that same way of holding her head or the same way of her shoulders, the way she holds her shoulders, how that goes? That's what Rehoboam was to Solomon. And as you start running through Rehoboam's life, you see a lot of copy of Solomon, which is there. Now, that's good and that's bad. The first 3 years of the reign, Rehoboam was a godly king. He did well. He did really well. But then he started marrying foreign women. He started following false gods. And in fact, he went a little bit further. All right, bringing that to today. Imagine if your kids grow up just like you. All right? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Because guess what? They probably are going to end up growing up just like you. A lot of boys grow up and marry their mamas, which is scary, right? And a lot of girls grow up and they marry their daddies, right? It doesn't always happen that way. Some people marry the exact opposite of their mother. They're like, I'm done with that. We're going the other direction, right? And some people are that way with their daddies. I'm not marrying my daddy. I'm going the other way. And sometimes that happens. And, of course, there's variance with everybody. Well, think about it. What if your children had the same spiritual outlook that you had? Would you be satisfied and happy with that? What if the people around you, on either side of you on the pew tonight, what if they had the same spiritual outlook and same spiritual maturity that you had? What we always have to remember is we are making an impression. People watch us. People know us. People see us. We are making an impression on other people. And the next generation is going to be colored, going to be influenced, going to be pushed by us, by our attitude, by our actions, by who we are and the things about us. And so that's something pretty important for us to think about because in a lot of ways, the kids are going to be just like us, okay? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, fathers, don't provoke your children, bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. All right, now go back 2 chapters. Go back to 1 Kings 12. I think it's verse 1. Yeah, 1 Kings 12, let's start in verse 1. This is actually before the reign, but I wanted to cover that idea of being impressed by his father first. This is what we know Rehoboam for, correct? All right, so here we go. Rehoboam has just become king. This is back when all the nation is together still. And let's go ahead and read it, if you don't mind. In chapter 12, verse 1. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all of Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. And so it happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, remember Jeroboam is the man who was Solomon's head servant. He was his building project manager. Jeroboam received a prophecy that he had received 10 of the tribes. And you'll remember this in 2 weeks because we'll talk about it. Jeroboam's problem is he never waits. He wants everything immediately. And so he receives a promise. He's going to receive a part of the nation, and he tries to take it right then. Solomon crushes him, and he is sent in exile all the way over to Egypt. So he's been in Egypt the last 25 years. All right, a little bit of background there. All right, so it happened Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard it. He was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt, that they sent and called him. This is the top 10 tribes. Then Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came together and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the burdensome service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So he said, depart from me 3 days and come back to me. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived. And he said, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you'll be a servant to these people today and serve them and answer them and speak good words to them, then they will be servants of yours forever. But he rejected that advice which the elders had given him, and he consulted the young men who'd grown up with him who stood before him. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you should speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger is going to be thicker than my father's waist. Now, whereas your father put a heavy yoke on you, I'm going to add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, I'm going to chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day as the king had directed, saying, come back to me the third day. And the king answered the people roughly and rejected the advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I'm going to add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, I'm going to chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord had spoken by Abijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam and his son Nebat. Verse 16. Now when all Israel saw that the king would not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, David. So Israel departed to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel, who dwelt over the cities of Judah. Now Rehoboam sent King Rehoboam sent Aram, who was in charge of the revenue. But all Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. Therefore the king mounted his chariot in haste to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And as we continue along, we see where he's going to get mad. He's going to put together an army. He's going to go down and try to take care of those 10 tribes and make them behave. And God says, hey, listen, let's just stop there. This is God's work. This battle's not going to go well for you. So you just need to stop. All right, we're familiar with this. We cover this a lot of times in Bible classes. What's the lesson that we learn as we cover this? He didn't want to listen to God's plan. Absolutely. Okay?
Or his father's advice.
Right. Be careful who you listen to, right? The older people said, hey, listen, Jeroboam, if you will be kind to these people when you start, they're going to be loyal to you. They're going to follow you. And then as time goes on, if you need to raise taxes, you can raise taxes. But you need to be a servant of the people. All right? Now, that sounds like Solomon, doesn't it? Because Solomon said a prayer. Remember that prayer that he prayed, and we talked about that last week? And I talked about how I used to think it was like rubbing a genie lamp, and the lamp came out, or not the lamp stayed there, but the genie came out. And the genie said, I'll give you 3 wishes. What do you always wish for? I want 3 more wishes, right? Okay. What did Solomon pray for? Wisdom to guide these people. Solomon saw himself as a servant, at least early in his career. And he wanted to be a servant of the people. Now his son has grown up, and his son has seen the wrong parts of Solomon, and he's copying the wrong parts of Solomon. And instead of being a servant, he's being an oppressor. And he's listening to the wrong people. Instead, he's listening to the younger folks, and the younger folks are saying, listen, say Solomon was tough, we're going to be even tougher. Now, what do these younger folks want him to raise taxes for? They wanted more buildings. They wanted to build bigger buildings than their daddies had. They wanted to have more money than their daddies had. They wanted to have more influence than their daddies had. And they wanted to be bigger, at least in their own eyes, and everybody else's eyes too, if that would work, than their fathers had. And so they were going to go right after it. All right. There's a problem that happens in the world. And it happens when we listen to the wrong advice. Correct? 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33. Remember what that verse says? Your mama should have quoted it to you every day, right? Evil companionship corrupts good morals. Now, does what you listen to affect you? Okay, we might not think it does, but it does. It enters into our minds, it enters into our hearts, and it colors our personality. It covers who we are. and it causes us to act in a certain way. There's a lot of people whose political views are colored by whatever channel they watch, okay? There's a lot of people who their entertainment choices are colored by what the country singers are, or what the pop stars are, or whatever else it may be. We're influenced by the people we place ourselves around. And what Rehoboam was doing here was he was listening to the wrong crowd. All right, what are some examples of how we sometimes will listen to the wrong crowd? Now, don't get specific and say, oh, brother so-and-so, he heard the wrong thing and he did that. It's not what I'm looking for. Looking for generalities, okay? What are some examples of when people today listen to the wrong crowd? Split in the church, okay. You listen to people who are rebellious and angry, right? Okay, good.
People that think the wrong things.
Think the wrong things. Okay, different with doctrine a lot of times. Okay, want to change the church, leading to splits and issues. All right, was that you, Van? Okay, all right. Another example of where we listen. You think of anything?
Like a Lone Ranger Christian, you don't need the church.
Man, I am spiritual but not religious, right? That's the millennial thing people are throwing out there. In other words, I'm lazy, but you shouldn't say that. That's mean to say. I'm spiritual, I've got God, but I don't need the church, okay? You're listening to the wrong people when you get that idea. Do you need the church? Absolutely. It's like a coal in a fire. You pull a coal out, it's going to get cold, because our job in the church is to warm each other up, burn each other up, continue along in our work, okay? What would be another example?
You're only important if you're a good athlete or if you have lots of money.
Okay.
Very powerful.
Right. My self-importance depends on my power, my money, or my ability. Okay, my self-worth, I guess would be a better way to say it. And a lot of people believe that. If I'm not starting on the basketball team, if I don't have the right last name, if I didn't go to this college and have this degree, a lot of people say, hey, that person doesn't really matter as much. Okay, Scripture teaches that God loves the poor as much and perhaps more than the wealthy. You read James 2, 1 through 9. You read Luke chapter 15. You better be nice to those who don't have power, who are disenfranchised. That's a good one. That's a good one. What's another example of listening to the wrong crowd? A lot of people believe what they read on Facebook. Yes. All right. What is the hoax going around the last 2 or 3 days? Send $5.99 to whoever. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. That's especially true with Facebook. Yes. Okay. What else?
Don't listen to those that have the most wisdom.
Huh?
Don't listen to those that...
A lot of people just don't listen to the folks with the most wisdom, do they?
No.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. What were you saying?
It seemed like the people that get arrested always say, I didn't know they were going to do so-and-so. I just went along for the ride.
Yes. I didn't know that they were going to do it. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay? All right. We hear that a lot, don't we? If you're doing a lot of prison ministry, you'll hear that a bunch. Absolutely. Okay? You got all your hedonism folks, right? And the hedonism folks, hey, man, you know, you need to enjoy yourself. That's what's really important. Yeah, okay. You know, surely you can drink. Everybody's drinking. It's not that big of a deal. It's a rite of passage. You're supposed to sow your wild oats. The ideas of remaining pure, okay, not a big deal. You need to go and enjoy life. A lot of people are saying that, and you especially hear it with the kids in school, and you hear it a lot of times with folks at work, okay? And when we listen to the wrong people, it always leads to the wrong place, okay? God's ways are higher than man's ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are the ways of God above ours, right? Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 and 9. And that's a lesson that we always teach, okay? And that's a good way to go with that passage. Another good way, another good direction to go in that passage is think about leadership, okay? Leadership. What's it mean to be a leader in the church? Means to be a servant. What did Jesus do? John 13. Even though I'm the Son of God, even though I'm a leader, what did he do? He served. He got on his feet, washed the disciples. Got on his knees, washed the disciples' feet. A lot of times we get carried away and worked up. I'm in charge. People got to listen to me. You got to do what I want to do, right? And notice what's going on here with Rehoboam. They're coming up to Rehoboam and they're saying, listen, we're going to follow you, but you got to show us some love. Cut back our taxes, cut back the oppression that we're going through, cut back on this issue that we're doing. A lot of these things very likely were a lot more closer to literal than we're willing to admit sometimes. Were they beaten with whips? Begin reading about Solomon's life. He enslaved a lot of his own people and made them build a lot of these buildings. So these whips were something serious. These yokes that they had, a lot of slaves would be carrying around these yokes as well. A lot of these things were very literal to these folks. And he comes out and he says, listen, I'm such a leader, I'm going to beat you worse than my daddy did. I am going to be the one that's in charge. All right, when you show that attitude in the church, what happens a lot of times? Huh? Rebellion. People don't take to it. They don't take to it too well. And so each one of us as a Christian have to be careful about our manner and attitude, right? You've got to preach the truth, but you got to preach the truth in love. You got to show people you love them, that you care for them. You got to show an aspect of service and desire to make their lives better. And that's true in preaching very, very, very much so. And so Rehoboam comes through, and he's more worried about being a person in authority than he is about the nation. Now, remember, he's a stamp of his daddy. His daddy started a certain way, and his daddy changed. Sadly, Rehoboam took the later impression rather than the first impression, and that got him in trouble. Okay? And so there you see that idea of servant leadership. Jesus says, if you're going to be great in the kingdom, what do you need to do? You need to be a servant. You need to be a servant. Put yourself in a place that lets other people see the power or the love that you have for them. And so that's something very important for us to notice as we run across and as we look at that. And so, all right, let's go to our third section, back to 14. Back to 14. And this used to be an old-timey sermon way back when. Like 1930s and 40s and 50s. A lot of fun stuff there. And if you were around back then, you'll probably remember this, the Bronze Shield sermon. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. It's fun. All right. And so here we go. He's gone into rebellion. Rehoboam has. Let's look in verse 25. He's gone into rebellion. He is opening up all sorts of weird, crazy perversions with Ashereth poles, with high places. Horrible stuff which he's introduced. He does it on the surface because his wives, but then he decides, hey, this is kind of fun, so he gets into it too, and all these things. So in his 5th year, verse 25, it happened in the 5th year of King Rehoboam that Shishak, the king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. And he took away all the treasures of the house of the Lord and treasures of the king's house. He took away everything. He also took away all the gold shields which Solomon had made. Then King Rehoboam made bronze shields in their place and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guard who guarded the doorway of the king's house. And whenever the king entered the house of the Lord, the guards carried them and brought them back into the guard room. And the rest of the acts of Rehoboam that he did, they're written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. And they continue in war, both Rehoboam and Jeroboam, until his very, very last day. Okay? All right. You ever notice, maybe you don't notice, how sometimes people will give in church, and what they'll do is they'll roll up their money, and it'll be a stack. I'm poor tonight, but it'll be a stack about that big. And they'll drop it in the collection plate, and everybody looks at that big stack, and what do they think? Wow, that's a lot of money, right? And in the counter, whoever that may be, will open it up, and what is it all made of? $1 bills, right? But if you have like 10 or 12 $1 bills, If you roll it up just right, it looks like a whole lot of money. So everybody around you is thinking, man, he's giving a lot of money, okay? All right. Of course, none of y'all have ever heard that, but, you know, it happens at other churches. All right? Okay? What are those people trying to get across?
They're doing their share plus a little bit more probably.
Man, they're looking like they're giving good, but they don't have anything to give, right?
I've counted a lot of money here after church. I've never seen a roll of one.
That's what I like to hear. That's what the preacher likes to hear. All right. I had somebody ask me about the contribution one time, and I said, they don't let me even see the money. All I ever see is the number up there, and I'm looking at the top one, not the bottom one. This is what's going on, what Rehoboam's trying. Shishak comes up from Egypt, and we actually have historical records of this in Shishak's tomb. Many of the tablets which are there show him beating up Jewish people. He really, really enjoyed it. This is like the highlight of his life. But he has a lot of pictures of him beating up the Hebrews. Shishak came up, and God comes and tells Rehoboam, hey, listen, you've rebelled. It's over. Well, Rehoboam acts like he's going to repent, so he's going to lose his stuff, but he's not going to lose his kingdom. So they come and they clear the temple out, clear the palace out. Well, Rehoboam now has got some issues. And so what he does is he doesn't have the gold anymore that Solomon had plated throughout the temple, but he has some bronze. And so he gets all of his soldiers with these bronze shields, and what they do is they shine them and shine them and shine them where they look really good, all right? And then what they'll do is they'll hold them back here, and as the king walks in, they go, and try to show it to the sun, and it looks like gold. So when the king walks by, then they hide the shield again. So everybody thinks, wow, look at all that gold that's there. Look how fancy that is. Man, that's really awesome, okay? A lot of times, like some ladies with jewelry, you'll get costume jewelry. You'll have a jewel that big, right? And people look at it and think, wow, that's pretty awesome. It costs $1.99, right? At Walmart. It was in the candy aisle. All right. But, you know, people who don't know what they're looking at, that's what they see. And so, you see, that makes for a great sermon because there's a lot of people who show a ton of religion. They show a ton of faithfulness to their church. But is it the true church of the Lord? Well, no. But I mean, they're there in a pew, wherever that building may be, and they're crying, and they're singing, and they're swaying to the music, and they're listening to the preacher, and it's got a facade of religion about it, but they're not there to worship the Lord, and you can tell that because they're not following the Bible. They're giving a half-hearted effort, but they're trying to look good. You see how that sermon works there? You got a lot of people who go through life and they show, man, I love my family. And they will say, I love my family. That's one of those things that sometimes when you see it on Facebook, you don't believe, right? Better know better. I love my family on Facebook, but then you see them in real life, they're treating everybody really bad. That's that gold shield. Popping it out, but you can't leave it out too long or people will notice, hey, wait a second, that's kind of orangish for a gold, you know. So then they'll hide it back again. That's what we've got to be careful about with our religion. That's what we got to be careful about how we show to other people. Make sure your relationship with God is not just for show, and make sure your relationship with God is authentic. That gold which is there. May not be as big, may not impress everybody as much, but that's what we really, really need to be looking into. All right, what are some comments you got? I haven't preached my bronze shield sermon here, have I? It's fun. At least it keeps me awake.
How did you find out about the bronze? How did you find out the facts that you just stated?
I just made them up. No, but she just has which statements?
The one about the bronze shield looking gold in the sunlight.
Let me look it up here. Where are we at? 25, okay. All right, let's look at 26, okay. And he took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and treasures of the king's house. He took away everything. He also took away all the gold shields which Solomon had made. Okay, so that's where the gold disappears. So then, because of that, then King Rehoboam made bronze shields in their place and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guard who guarded the doorway of the king's house. All right, verse 28. And whenever the king entered the house of the Lord, the guards carried them, and then they brought them back into the guard room. So that's where that came from. That idea of bronze, they lost their gold, so then they had the bronze. What they would do is they would march through. Huh?
Where did you learn that?
That they polished them and
Yeah.
shined them and then hit them.
I'm trying to think back where I would have learned that. That's a Marshall Keeble sermon.
And Freed Hardeman.
No. Are you saying it doesn't look like that way?
No, I just had never heard that. I just wondered.
That is a Marshall Keeble sermon, is where I've heard it. And then I've heard it copied a lot. But Marshall Keeble was real big on it. But what Marshall Keeble would do is he would borrow one of his wife's rings and tell everybody it was worth $2 million, or as he would say, $2 million. You know, he had that voice. And he would go through and talk about how expensive it was, but he would just pop it out like that, back and forth. That's where I stole it from. But
Well, it does say that when the king went in his house, they would show the shields. And
Well, yeah.
As soon as he was in,
they went back. Yeah, they would escort him with those shields as he went from the palace to the temple there. They lost all the gold, and then after that, they shined up the brass or the bronze, and then they would carry that across.
What does it say in the Chronicles?
Let's find out. Let's look at Chronicles.
That's another.
Yeah, we're going to be working Chronicles. Just a second. Second Chronicles 12 should be. Is the Second Chronicles 12? If they behave the way they should, that's where it should be. Second Chronicles 12, but I don't know if this is over here. Let's see. Where's Shishak? Second Chronicles 12, verse 2. And this is where they come with all their people, even the Ethiopians. They come and say they're going to take it. He took away all the treasures in verse 9, carries away the gold shields. Verse 10, Rehoboam made bronze shields in their place, committed them to the captains of the guard who guarded the doorway. When the king entered, the guard would go and bring them out, then they would bring them back into the guard room. But after that, he humbles himself, and he behaves for the last, 17 years or so. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So I think that's really what was happening. As they were following him through, they had that bronze which went there. Now, you watch this on like some historical channels on TV. This is one of the places where they'll camp a lot with the Ark of the Covenant. What happens to the Ark of the Covenant is it disappears. And we don't really know where it goes. It wasn't there when Rome took it over in AD 70. But we don't know when the ark necessarily disappeared. Titus and Vespasian, AD 68 to AD 70, they took down Jerusalem. That's the fulfillment of Matthew 24. Remember the wars, the rumors of war, and the ensign that would come down. Matthew 24, beginning in verse 5, going through verse 35, that prophecy is there. But Titus, legend says, or Josephus, says as he came through, they fought the Jews. They killed over 1 million of them. They're going through in the temple, and people are fighting to their last breath, and they fight, get to the outer court, fight, get to the inner court. And these Jews have gotten to the point they don't even have swords anymore, but they're just standing, doing whatever they can to try to block the Romans. The Romans finally get into the Holy of Holies. They break it down, get in there, and the room's empty. And Titus is like, that's it? That's all they were fighting for? There's nothing in here. What in the world? And but there was the tradition that the Ark of the Covenant was there. And so if you go to the Triumphal Arch, which was built in Rome after the destruction of Jerusalem, you can look at the little ensigns, the decorations, and you can see the Ark of the Covenant. Titus claimed that he came back with the Ark because he had worked so hard killing so many Jews in that work. Well, the question is, where did the Ark go? Well, 586, Jerusalem was ransacked. So you have all the Babylon going on. You have Belteshazzar, remember the writing on the walls? But he had all the silver plates, the silver goblets. And he was getting drunk with those and worshiping his beer god, the god Bacchus. but Babylon never shows that they have it. Now, you go to Ethiopia, there's a temple built in the design of the tabernacle, and they claim they have the Ark of the Covenant, and they have a cheapened version of the old law that they're following. They're killing goats and killing lambs and just having a good old time there.
That wasn't much of an ark.
No. And they claim that they have the ark, but of course it's holy and nobody gets to see it. But what the Ethiopians are claiming is that Queen of Sheba went up there, saw everything, was really impressed with Solomon. And so they came up with Shishak, as you read here in Chronicles, took that temple, carried all the articles along with the ark back, and it's in Ethiopia to this day. Now, is that real? Probably not. You know, that would just be really crazy if it was.
About like the Templars.
Right. You know, maybe it is. What happened to the ark? We don't know. It's gone. We have no idea where it's at. But that a lot of times people will go here to try to trace back that ark. Queen of Sheba, Ethiopia. Ethiopia really wants to be the new Judah. It's kind of interesting looking at some of that religion which is there. You got some Rastafarian crawling around there as well. But that's a little historical thing there. All right, getting back to the gold and the bronze, what's another way we cheapen our religion? We talked about false religion, denominationalism. What's another way we cheapen our religion sometimes? Morality. You ever see people, and again, don't point at anybody, but you ever see people who act a certain way at work and a different way at church? Do you remember as a teenager seeing some guys who were doing things on Friday and Saturday nights, and then here they were in church on Sunday, dressed up and looking good, even leading prayer sometimes? Okay? At a first glance, you and I, seeing these guys only on Sunday, we think, man, they're religious. Man, you know, they're faithful. Man, that's a good person, really singing well, really praying well. Okay? Because you only see the glance because it passes through. Does God see all the other parts? He sure does. And we've got to be careful that we're not giving God a cheap religion. We've got to be careful that we're not coming across and saying, God, you know, I'm not going to give you the gold. You're just going to have to be happy with the bronze. That's something that you got to be really careful about doing as you come across. All right, Rehoboam's legacy. I got the three things here. First of all, his legacy is he destroyed his kingdom. He ended up with only half of it because of his pride. And in trying to be greater than his daddy, he ended up destroying what his daddy and his grandfather had built. Okay? Can pride mess us up today? A lot of relationships destroyed because people are prideful and they don't understand leadership. Okay? Number two, loss of integrity. Okay? He was a great king of God's people, king of Judah. And he went into false idolatrous worship. And he went from being the head of the holy kingdom to being just like everybody else around him. And there's some times where people will say, man, we want to be like the other nations. We want to be like the other churches. But when you do that, you just cheapen what God's given you. You just cheapen that gift which God has placed there. Okay, number three, he lost his national sovereignty. He didn't get to be in charge of himself anymore. Instead, other people were in charge of him. All right, let's spend some time on sovereignty. Do a thing at camp, and you've seen it. Put a board up there on the wall. You let each boy, each girl, put a nail into that board. I'll finish real quick. You let them pull the nails out. What's still left in that board? All the holes. What's that symbolize? The effects of sin. You can have those nails pulled out. You can have those sins forgiven. But what happens? The effect's still there. Okay? This is your and mine and your, however you say it. This is our purity. Okay? We sin. I can't even tear paper. All right. We sin. Okay? I can get this and glue it. I can get this and staple it. I can get this and put bubble gum on it. I don't know. I can do all sorts of stuff to try to put it back together. And you look at it real quick from far enough away, and you might not see it. But no matter what I do, is the tear still there? Is the quality degraded? It is. When you and I sin in our life, we can be forgiven and placed back together. But the effects of those sins oftentimes will remain. It's degraded. The gold turns to bronze. And you got to be careful. That's why you don't sin. That's why you remain pure in Christ. All right. Thanks for being here. Enjoyed our time together.